you just start scrambling for them. So you'll run the marathon, even though your mom just or your dad just broke your legs, because you don't have any other opportunities to potentially get connection and praise from them, which is the closest you're going to get to love.
Hello and welcome to How to Be a Terrible Daughter, a podcast for anyone that's ever been called terrible or horrible by their family. It's also the podcast where Megan and I hate your parents for you.
Yes, we're happy to. We have plenty of untapped rage for everyone. I am Megan Caper. I am a medical intuitive and healer, as well as an occupational therapist.
I'm Elizabeth Malmed, and I'm a psychotherapist and an artist.
And we're cousins.
I love that. I love it.
So today we're going to talk about potentially triggering subject.
Like every episode of this podcast.
Like an absolutely triggering concept. So please be prepared. Make sure you have some nice cuddly blankets and a warm cup of tea and something soft and fuzzy like a pet or a stuffy nearby. Because today we're going to talk about narcissistic abuse. I heard a quote on TikTok a couple weeks ago, and I apologize. If anyone knows who this is that said this, please tag us and let us know. But there was this creator who said, having narcissistic parents is like being forced to run a marathon by your parents after they've broken your legs. And then the whole time they stand on the sidelines and berate and shame you about how badly you're doing, while guilting you about the money they spent on your running shoes. And then afterwards, they complain about the hospital bills and scars. It's such an accurate metaphor. And again, I apologize, TikTok creator who said this, but it is absolutely the feeling of constantly being set up again and again and again, like set up to fail and then absolutely shamed and berated for the fact that you failed. And it is psychologically crippling, really.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think?
One of the things about narcissistic abuse, I mean, I guess it's true of a lot of it, but it's so hard to pin down. And part of it is because they know how to behave in public, but also, like, when I think about narcissistic abuse, my sense is of this experience of either I'm not there, like I'm invisible or ignored, and so, like, not just I'm ignored, but that like I don't exist, or I'm some kind of object that's either the good object, right? Like, look how amazing I am because I own this wonderful object, or, you know, you are a piece of shit and you're broken and you're going in the trash and you always should have been in the trash, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I mean, it really is this experience of not feeling like you are human in someone else's eyes, and that you are of benefit for them, or you are causing them some sort of shame or humiliation, or like you said, or you're not doing anything, in which case you just don't exist. And it's so difficult to get off of that roller coaster, because the times when you are in their good graces and they feel like you're benefiting from them, those moments of connection and love, it's not really love. Those moments of connection and the closest thing you can get to love as a kid, you just start scrambling for them. So you'll run the marathon, even though your mom just or your dad just broke your legs, because you don't have any other opportunities to potentially get connection and praise from them, which is the closest you're going to get to love.
And in some ways, it's like using what's natural and functional about you to your detriment, right? Because we're wired to look for what is nurturing, right? That's kind of like, that's healthy, right, in a person. And then what ends up happening is that it's like, what is it? The milk is poisoned, right? You know?
So I want to ask a question. What do you think it is that makes narcissistic abuse different than other kinds of abuse?
I think it is similar to, I mean, it's related to what I had said, but one of my therapists early on gave me this really great image, which is that the targets of narcissists, or I guess pretty much anybody, are like Teletubbies. Teletubbies had these like little TVs on their stomachs, and they would just show videos on them. And my therapist would say, a narcissist will just take whatever video they want to play and just put it on you. And so if you're going to be the object of shit, I mean, that's how they do it, right? And they don't see anything except for what they want to see.
Yeah.
Right. If they want to tell a story about how wonderful you are, they'll just put that on your tummy, and that's who you are.
Yeah. I think there's also something about narcissistic abuse where, for other types of abuse, like let's say you had a parent who was an alcoholic or a parent who was physically abusive, they're usually that way all the time, right? Like you see people who are alcoholics feel the need to drink in all settings, right? Or like, I mean, we've all seen a kid in the supermarket whose parent was being a little too physical with them and it's uncomfortable. Like they'll do that in public. But with narcissists, they are very adept at showing different faces to different groups of people. So a lot of times the only people that see the truly sort of rageful, abusive side of the narcissists are their own families and sometimes even their own children. Sometimes they're even able to like keep it together with their spouses. I should say not even just keep it together, but actually show a well put together, caring, insightful, like someone that you would esteem, right, to almost everyone else. But then to their own kids and their own families, they are a completely different person. It's very much like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde situation. And so, when you're in a situation where there's a narcissist, like one, other people don't believe you. I think that's what makes this abuse different is other people don't believe you because that's not who they see, right? That's not the side of a person that they see. And secondly, you start doubting yourself because you're being told by all these other sources that this person is kind and amazing and thoughtful and smart and considerate and would give you the shirt off their back and, all that shit, right? So it's a type of abuse that I think is psychologically destabilizing for the person who's being abused in a way that other types of abuse aren't as psychologically destabilizing. Other types of abuse are horrid in their own unique ways. But if we're talking about narcissistic abuse, I think it's that inevitable point where you start doubting your own sanity. That is really the kind of hallmark of this. And it's one of the reasons it makes it so hard to get out of these situations. You don't have a voice in your head that's saying, this is clearly wrong. You have a voice in your head that's saying, I think something's off, but I'm not sure if it's my fault or not.
Your insides are just scrambled, right? And you're feeling a whole bunch of things. I feel like it's, how like when a little kid comes into an elevator and they just like push all the buttons, right?
Yeah.
I feel like that sometimes, when I get out of a that's exactly how I felt the last time I spoke to my mom. And I was like, oh no, like I'm like, I feel confused. And, it's this real surreal. And it's because she just pushed all the buttons, just all of them. And it's just so confusing.
And you said something to me once after a conversation I had with my mom where you said something like, if, to me, you said, if you came out of this conversation feeling confused, you're not the one who's wrong here. You know? So I want to talk a little bit about like the different subtypes because narcissists are so good at abusing people that they even have like subcategories of abuse that have been like named and described because they're so fucked up and unique in terms of like how the abuse happens.
It's
that, like,
31 flavors is
it
what
is
it is.
31 flavors. It has literally taken like PhD academics, like taking like entire careers to describe like this one type of crazy abusive stuff. So
It's true, right? I do that when referring people professionally. It's like, okay, not all therapists are trained in trauma, right? Not all trauma therapists are trained in complex trauma or abuse. Not all abuse trauma are taught in about narcissism. So it is such a it's bespoke is what it is.
it really is. It is bespoke. And it makes it really, like, speaking from personal experience, it makes it really hard to find a therapist, especially now that I've done a good amount of work. Because not only do I need someone that like is a therapist, is versed in trauma, is versed in complex trauma, is versed in the particular type of complex trauma that happens from narcissistic abuse, but they also are at a point where they can treat someone that's done over, a decade of therapy and is really working on sort of some of the finer things when it comes to this. So yeah, it is a very bespoke, perfect word. It is a very bespoke sort of specialized set of knowledge or awareness. And so we're going to share that with you now so that you all have that awareness and that knowledge, because I think it's really, it is helpful to have someone describe something that has a name and has a definition that is so spot on to your experience. I was talking earlier about how one of the hallmarks of narcissism is that it makes you doubt your own reality or whether you're the crazy one. And so to have someone describe something exactly, you're like, oh my God, like that is exactly what happened to me. Having it have a name and a description makes you realize like, oh, that's not me.
Right.
Like, that's the crazy. That's the crazy happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Someone else knows about this. This is the thing.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Oh my, someone else has experienced this. Yes,
Yeah,
totally. Okay, so we want to talk about some of these terms. We're going to give some definitions, and then like if you have a super quick description of like a real life example of this, let's add that in too. So let's start with love bombing and devaluation, which are sort of two parts of a cycle. So the cycle sort of continues love bombing and devaluation, and then it starts again with love bombing and devaluation. So love bombing is, it's so interesting because love bombing can look like just someone being fond of you. Like it's so sneaky because it can look like something that someone who is not a narcissist would do. So love bombing is when someone, especially when you first meet someone, and they think that you are the bee's knees, right? They think that you are an amazing person and they shower you with compliments and they want to be around you. And they, just can't stop talking about all the ways that you're such a great person and an amazing person. A lot of times it's like, I've never met someone like you. Like, where have you been all my life? Like, it's basically putting someone in a place of great esteem or like up on a pedestal, right? Like, this person is just enamored of you in a lot of ways. And again, this happens in daily life. Like, I have met other human beings that immediately we have such a great connection that I'm like, I love this person and I want to spend time with them and I want to be with them. So it's sort of really hard to tell love bombing because it can feel just like one of those immediate connections, right? So whether it's romantic or friendship or whatnot, it can feel like one of those times where you just have immediate chemistry with someone, right? But you can tell that it's love bombing because at some point, it will be followed by the devaluation part of the cycle.
Yep.
And this goes back to what you were saying about you're either a good object or you're a bad object.
Yeah.
Right? So during the love bombing phase, which actually happening is that it's not chemistry. It's that the narcissist has identified you as the object that they need in their life right now. So you're a good object to them. Right?
Yeah.
At some point, you will do something or not. I mean, that something could be like holding a boundary. It could be like breathing in the wrong way that's annoying to them. I mean, you'll do something. Who knows what it is? It's not going to be logical. Where all of a sudden they decide, you're not perfect. That all of these things that they thought about you and all of these ways that they thought you were just this amazing human being, they were wrong. And you're actually a horrible human being. That's the only other option, right? You're either an amazing human being or a horrible human being.
One of the things about that is that in their own mind, without telling you, they will change their idea about what object you should be.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's like, oh my God, this is the most beautiful flower vase in the world, blah, 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 blah. And then, why aren't you a bicycle? Right?
Yes.
You're not taking me anywhere.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. When that happens, you start getting devalued because, and devaluation is like the opposite of love bombing. It's like, what's wrong with you? You're terrible. You're horrible. A lot of times you get, how could you do this to me? You know, how could you not be a bicycle and do that to me? You know, I needed a bicycle, right? And so it's a lot of personal attacks. It's a lot of basically the opposite. So if love bombing makes you feel amazing about yourself, devaluation makes you feel way less than you were before.
It is shaming. And you've always been a piece of shit. Yeah.
And if you say to them, but wait a minute, a month ago, you said I wasn't a piece of shit. Like, what happened to that? They will stay with the consistency of their story. So they'll be like, well, I was wrong. If I'd known that you weren't a bicycle, I would have thought you were a piece of shit then too, right? So there's no awareness that there's been this switch, or if there has been a switch, it's your fault. That is also your fault, right? You fooled them into thinking you were a good person, right? But now that they know.
And then the weird thing is that it'll come around again, and then all of a sudden you'll be the best thing since sliced bread again. And it's like, oh God, like what's going on? Like, I'm feeling very dizzy. I remember there was a time when my mom was talking about this, what I thought was an ex-friend, right? And she was like, oh, we're going to go to lunch, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I thought you hated her. And my mom looked at me and was, you know, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was basically like, what would ever make you think that? It's
right.
Like, because the last time we talked about this person, you spent 5 hours telling me how horrible they were and how you were never going to speak to them again.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So that's exactly the cycle. So you'll get devalued and shamed. And then again, at some later point, which you have no idea when it's going to happen, you'll be something that will make them look good again. You'll be the good object or something that they need. And you'll be, you know, trotted out as this exemplar of, you know, being an amazing daughter, amazing person. I mean, I heard just as often from my mom in front of other people, usually, actually, now that I think about it, like, Megan is such a good child, and she's so smart, and she's so beautiful, and she's so kind, and she's so this, and she's so that. And then, you know, a couple days later in private, she would be like, you're a horrible child, and I can't believe you would do this to me. And what kind of daughter would ever treat their mother like that? It's shameful that you would do that, blah, 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 right? So it really is dizzying. And then, you know, a week later, we'll be out to lunch with one of her friends, and she'll be like, Megan's done this amazing thing at school, and I'm so, you know, she's just the best, right? So it is a cycle, and that's the elevator buttons, right? You just feel so whipped around. Like, what part of this is true, if any at all?
You also obviously see them do it to other people. So even if you aren't the target in the moment, someone's always the target. And to even be in the presence of something like that, just the tremendous, the rage and or ecstasy, right? It's just so overwhelming to the system.
It is absolutely overwhelming to the system, especially because people that grow up with narcissists as parents end up becoming super aware of every emotional, verbal, nonverbal cue. So you're like an antenna that's like fully like, you know, taking on all this information, like one of those giant parabolic satellite dishes, like looking for signals from this deep space, you know? You're just constantly trying to gather any tiny piece of information you can so that you can survive by knowing what mood your mom's in, right? But because of that, you're also always taking in all of the drama that's happening with the narcissist, like all of the drama that's happening with your mom, either if it's, again, yes, like you said, ecstasy about they just met this new person who's amazing, or whether it's rage, because this person that they've known for 6 months now did something that, is horrifying and they never want to talk to them again. Yeah. So that is love bombing and devaluation. Let's talk a little bit about ignoring boundaries, because I think that's a really key piece of narcissistic abuse. I feel like I talked about love bombing. You want to talk about ignoring boundaries a little bit?
Sure. Well, ignoring boundaries, God, there's so many ways to do it. One is just as if you hadn't said anything, right? It's like as if they don't hear.
What's a boundary? Let's backtrack just a little. Like, give me an example of a boundary.
Well, in the kind of therapy that I do, one of the things they do in the first session is they have you like imagine, like, you have a bubble, right? Personal space bubble, right? And they have you like space it out with your hands, right? Like find out where the edges of the bubble are and actually draw it in the 3-dimensional space around you. And this can be really hard for some people, and you kind of hold your arms out to whatever level and you say, this is my space. This is my space. You can only come in if I invite you. And if I don't invite you, you can't come in. Ooh. And so our personal boundaries aren't about anybody else, but it's about how we stay safe, like physically and psychologically, and how we can stay centered and have things be good for us, right? So sometimes a boundary could be getting to bed at a reasonable time, or, eating a certain amount of healthy food, or, having playtime, or not speaking to someone, or not going to a family function because you're just not up for it, right?
Yeah, having some sort of sense of agency over your own body, your own mind, your own time, and being able to say, like, hey, I'm just not feeling that right now, or hey, what I really need right now is this, and having another person respect that.
Mm-hmm.
And narcissists are absolute professional level boundary breakers.
Oh, yes,
it's like an extreme sport. They are like gold medal consistently, like, that country that always wins the gold medals for a certain sport. Narcissists are the gold medal boundary ignoring, breaking people. Yeah. So, like, if I feel like this, I want to like go right into DARVO, because DARVO is such a great example of like how a narcissist will respond if you say you have like a certain boundary or you state your boundary. So DARVO stands for deny, attack, and then reverse victim and offender. Like, if you and I were hanging out, like, we are both certified not narcissists. So if you and I were hanging
out, we've had many professionals have to tell us over and over again.
Absolutely.
We are not narcissists.
Absolutely. Yes, that's another interesting topic to talk about, is the ongoing belief that there's something wrong with you, like, years later. Anyway, so for example, if, you said to me, like, hey, Megan, I know we're supposed to talk tonight, and I know that you're going through a really hard time even, but I am just too tired. Like, I don't have the bandwidth to speak with you tonight. I mean, I would probably have emotions about that. I would probably be disappointed, right? Because maybe I had something I wanted to talk to you about, and I would maybe be a little sad, right? I would maybe even be a little anxious because I'm like, oh, well, now I have to figure out another way to cope with this, right? The coping mechanism I thought I had talking to you is now not going to happen. But what I wouldn't do is be angry at you for expressing your own needs. I would say probably something like, I'm a little disappointed, but that's okay. Like, I want you to take care of yourself, right?
Yeah.
So I think what's going on there is a couple things. One, I respect your boundary, right? You said it and I respected it. And two, the emotions that I have come up, I understand that it's my responsibility to handle my own emotions in that space, right? To find another way that's not you, because you have told me you're unavailable, of making sure that I get my needs met, right? Through another person, through another activity, something, right? So that's what it would look like to respect a boundary, right? Is somebody says, I need this. The other person says, even though that's causing me some unsettling emotions, I understand and I respect that. That is not how narcissists handle boundaries. So a really common thing that they do is what's called DARVOing again. Like I said, deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. I almost want to do like a DARVO role play. Can you set a boundary with me and I'll DARVO you?
Please.
Okay.
So Megan, if you want to get some water, some tea, that's great. It's all there. There's one cup that's mine. It's the Wonder Woman coffee cup, and I'm really attached to it. So if you could just not use that one, that would be great.
Okay. I mean, first of all, I understand what you're saying, but telling me that there's a cup that I can't use when I am a guest in your house, I think that that is just, I mean, I can't understand how someone would invite someone into their house and then make me, the person who is invited into your house, feel like crap. Like I have to like tiptoe around your cups.
Yes.
And like make sure I don't use certain cups because you have some sort of like inane attachment. It's a cup, Elizabeth. It's a cup. Do you understand how ridiculous you sound right now? Do you understand how hurtful what you said was? That I can't use some of your cups? I don't even want to come to your house anymore. That's how badly you've made me feel. That's how badly you've made me feel. How do you feel about that?
If only. If only you didn't come to my house anymore.
I know. After years of therapy, you'd be like, great.
Thank you.
Problem solved. Don't come to my house anymore. Like,
Totally.
So, but what I did there was I denied her right to have a boundary, right? Sort of like, how dare you have a cup? And then I reversed it and I made it so that she was, in fact, attacking me by having this boundary about the cup, right?
Yep.
So DARVOing is really, really common, and it makes you, or it makes me anyway, like feel like having boundaries isn't safe because I'm going to get just eviscerated and yelled at, right? By having any kind of boundary.
Absolutely.
Yeah. A lot of times DARVOing will end in sort of that narcissistic rage, right? Where the person is just, I mean, I probably didn't even do it justice, honestly, but the person is just like enraged at this tiny little boundary. Like I was probably kind of restrained, actually, compared to what I've seen from my own mom.
You actually were. And the big tell was that you actually reflected back to me what I said, which was Megan's hearing that I said something at all.
I told you I'm not a narcissist.
I think that like what I would see, actually probably more like the slow burn of like, oh, something like, why? I would never use that cup. What?
Yes, that's a better one.
Of course I wouldn't, and then just be like, and then like the next time, like use the cup, and if you call them on it, be like, well, I'm in crisis. And, I don't see why you should have to nitpick about all of these things when like I'm here because,
Right.
Oh, geez. Right.
Yes. Yes, yeah. Absolutely. Everything ends up becoming reflected back and centered back to the narcissist and how everything in the world like has deeply wounded and affected them. They really can't see how anything could not have something to do with them. I mean, that's sort of where like the ego narcissist, narcissist is the guy who looked in the lake and saw his own reflection and got like, stuck there, right? It's not egotistical like I think highly of myself. It's egotistical like I'm unable to conceive that something that's happening in the world isn't about me. So let's move on to our mini mom off, so this is every week we do. This is based on a drinking game that I came up with years ago called the Crazy Mom Off, where when I would meet someone and find out that they also had a crazy mom, I would say, let's go out to drink and have a crazy mom off. And we go and we would start off by telling stories that were just sort of like a little bit kooky, like not super crazy, but just like a little bit kooky, a little bit weird, a little bit like, huh. And then start like upping the ante repeatedly until you get to a story where the other person just is like, all right, you win. That is way crazier than anything my mom has ever done.
I am tapping out.
Yes, I am tapping out. You win. You absolutely win. And the rules of the game are that you drink whenever somebody says something, yourself or the other person, that makes you feel like you need a drink. So we have adapted that to like a little mini mom off where every week we're going to tell a story of something crazy that our mom did. And then just each week figure out who wins. I think we're pretty even at this point. Like you won a couple rounds and I've won a couple rounds. So
Yes.
like our moms at this point are equally crazy.
But who's really won is our therapist because we keep coming to sessions.
Yeah, at least financially.
Yes. I hope they have therapists. And she's like,
I
oh my God,
know.
I heard the worst stories today.
Oh God. Yeah, I know, right? I have a story. So one of the types of narcissistic abuse that we had on our list, there's so many. There's no way we might have to do a part 2 on this episode because there's so many. There's no way we were going to get to all of them. But one of them that I wanted to talk about that I feel like I have a good mini mom off story is what's called triangulation. Can I tell you a triangulation story?
Yes.
Okay. So triangulation is when narcissists are very good at isolating their victims. So they're very good at creating situations where their victims either feel like they can't talk to anyone else about what's going on. And one of the ways they do that is by sort of splitting people apart and sort of making them feel like they're either enemies of each other or that somehow there's something that they shouldn't talk to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a better way of saying that? I feel like I'm not describing this very well.
I don't know. Go with the story.
Here's my mini mom off story. So I'm sure I have permission to tell this story because I've told it before, even though it's about my sister. So my sister is 9.5 years older than me. So there was a big age difference. And so we didn't really grow up together. We didn't really have a relationship very much when we were growing up. There was such a huge age difference. And so when I was in college, so I think I was 18 or 19, so she was 28 or 29 and she was getting married. And she called me up. When I say she called me up, like, I don't know the last time we'd talked on the phone at that point. Like, we really didn't have much of a relationship at all. So it was very unique that we were even talking that she was calling me. We would see each other at like family functions and stuff. But she called me up and she said, hey, I'm getting married and I'm having a very, very small wedding. And I know it's sort of traditional for the sister to be maid of honor. She's like, I'm not having bridesmaids or anything. I'm just having a maid of honor. And I know it's pretty traditional for the sister to be the maid of honor, but, being honest, we're not very close. Would you be okay if I had my best friend be the maid of honor? And I said, yeah, that's fine. I said, I appreciate you asking. Like, that's actually very kind of you to ask. I don't have a problem with that at all. Go ahead and, call and have your best friend. So fine. It was like a 5-minute conversation, 10-minute conversation. I'm fine. I get a phone call back about half an hour later. My sister calls back. She says, are you okay?
Oh, no. A half hour later.
I went, yeah, fine.
Man, your mom works fast.
What's up? She does work fast. Turns out that my sister had called my mom or my mom had called my sister. I don't remember which. And
first mistake. I'm sorry.
Yes. And my sister had told my mom what happened, right? That she'd asked me if I would be okay if her best friend was the maid of honor, blah, blah, blah. And my mom then calls her back and says that she'd called me, which is absolutely not true. She'd called me and I was in tears because I was so upset that my sister had wanted somebody else to be maid of honor. That did not happen. Just to be clear, I did not talk to my mom. That did not happen.
Right.
So that is an example. I'm not at the end of the story, but that is an example of triangulation when you try to split people apart or make people think that they're upset with each other or somehow cause like unease in the relationship or difficulty or drama in the relationship so that, my sister's now wary of talking to me. I'm now not sure why my sister's not talking to me, right? There's all sorts of stuff like that.
Wow.
But the reason I remember this story is because it was the first time. Normally, when I was a kid, I would have just left it at that, or my sister would have just left it at that. But this is the first time that my sister actually called me back and verified.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So instead of just assuming that that was accurate and moving forward with that story, my sister called me back and said, hey, that's why when I answered the phone, she said, are you okay? And I said, I'm fine. And she said, well, mom just told me this story.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, not only is it not true that I said that to her, I didn't even talk to her. Like,
wow.
And so I like that story because it's actually triangulation falling flat on its face.
Uh-huh.
Yes. So she tried to sow
Whew.
seeds of like massive drama where there was none because she couldn't handle the fact that my sister and well, I don't know why. I'm not going to read her mind.
Because
Just cause.
because
Probably because she, in her mind, she wants everyone else in the world to think that her daughters are these perfect siblings who love each other so much. And she probably was worried about what other people would think when I wasn't the maid of honor, right? Like, what would that say about her parenting skills?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm guessing. But
Well, I also think that some of it's just about like long-term planning, because I think about the confidence that your mom had, essentially, that you guys wouldn't speak to each other. And that is the kind of confidence that only comes from having sown so many poisonous seeds, maybe randomly over the years, to just have a sense that, you know what I mean? She ruined your relationship consistently and subtly for so many years that she didn't really have to worry about
yeah,
even making her lie believable, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, we've grown up constantly with, for the most part, me being the golden child and my sister being the scapegoat, which we'll have to have a whole other episode about. But that in and of itself just sowed so many seeds of distrust and anger and jealousy between my sister and I. I think she, on 99% of the time, would have been right that we wouldn't have talked, right?
Yeah.
We would have just been like, my sister would have been like, oh, that Megan, she's upset about everything, right? Or whatever, right? Like whatever my lie my mom had been telling her for years. So anyway, that's my crazy mom off.
Hmm.
To you.
Wow.
Story.
I think about how we can't help but think about like sophisticated reasons for why narcissists do things. But I actually sometimes think that it's really so much more simple than that, which is that toys don't play with each other,
Hmm.
you know?
Interesting. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you're the only real person in the universe and everything else is just an object,
Right. Right.
you know?
They don't have a right to play with each other. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my story is not nearly as bad as yours, but I'm just reminded of the
Oh my
time.
God. I felt like that story I just told was not even that bad. Go ahead.
Oh, no, no, no. No. And it is audacious because your mom out and out lied, which is different from the obfuscation that my mother does in this story, which is, and you'll remember this because you're a part of it, which is, I think I called you up and I was talking to you about how my mom loved your apartment. So I think you had moved into a new place, and like my mom bought you like a dining room set or something like that.
Yes.
And my mom
Yes.
spent about 20 minutes talking to me about how amazing your apartment was. And she just described everything and like all of the stuff or whatever. I don't know if I said something to you like, I don't know, when she had the time to go see your apartment or whatever, but you said she's never been here, which was so disorienting. I mean, talk about that confusion that I was like, wait, what?
Oh my God. Well, no, it was an out and out lie, though.
Wait,
I mean,
what?
that was also a lie. That was an out and out lie.
Yes. Yeah, but it wasn't like I just spoke, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
there wasn't really even time for your mom's lie to seem true in a way. Does that make sense? I mean, it was a half an hour later, Like
Yeah.
what? Yeah. So it's
Oh
not
my
the worst thing
God.
that ever happened, but it's just one of those things where it's just like, oh, what
It
does
is
that mean?
so those little things. So I think what people don't understand is that those little things happening on a daily basis
Oh,
really start to destabilize your sense of reality, right? So it's not
yeah.
these huge, I mean, there are the huge cycles of rage where something really dramatic happens and maybe someone gets hurt, like physically hurt. But really, the thing that's destabilizing are those daily things, exactly like what you just described, where you start to just be so confused by what's real and what's not, or what actually happened or what doesn't. And I think one of the things that's really insidious is that even if you know this person's a narcissist, even if you've experienced this every day, probably in your mind, you were like, why would anyone lie about that? Why would she? That doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then, if it doesn't make sense, then there's two options. One is that the person's saying something that doesn't make sense. And the second is that I don't understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And what narcissists do is constantly default to the, well, you don't understand what's going on then, if you're confused, right? You start to really believe that by default, it's that you don't understand what's going on. There's something you're missing, right?
Yeah.
And over time, on a daily basis, these little stories, these little things like that, I mean, it adds up. I mean, I think one of the things that it took me the longest time after I like cut off ties with my mom to get over was questioning, did I do something wrong? What was my part in this? Am I misunderstanding? You know what I mean? Like it took decades for me to stop having that voice in my head. And so, yeah, that story is just a perfect example of like, you get off the phone and you're like, did I misunderstand? Wait, Megan says she didn't come over. So like, did I misunderstand what she was saying? Like, did she maybe tell me she had pictures and I didn't process that part? Or do you know what I mean? Like, it's just so destabilizing.
Yeah. Well, and also it's like, what other 1,000 things that I have believed just because my mom has kind of massaged the truth or, you know what I mean? Or twitched the needle or something like that, that I have no idea about, you know, what lies am I carrying in my mind, you know, that aren't true, that
especially about other family members. I had to do a huge like revisiting every time I would be like, well, we know so and such about so and so family member. Oh, no, wait a minute. My mom told me that. Maybe that was a lie, you know?
Right. Yeah. We know the sky is blue. Wait a minute.
My mom told me that.
I said, you know, although that reminds me of what Eric says, which is, what does he say? A broken clock is right twice a day. Yeah. Which really like it throws things, right? Because sometimes they are sort of accurate or whatever.
And it's usually based in some sort of like a kernel of truth that's just been completely distorted and exaggerated.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Let's very quickly share a tool that we both used this week that helped us get through some sort of feeling of unease or discomfort or fear or anger or something.
Coming at blank. Oh, funny with caffeine. No, I'm kidding.
Caffeine? Sure.
Actually, there is something that it's kind of counterintuitive, but you know, I've got stress in my life right now. And so my A-level coping mechanisms are not really available. So, but this kind of like the surprising thing that's actually helped is like when I like wake up early, too early, I should have gotten more sleep, but I'm just anxious.
Yeah.
I just get up. I get up and just use that energy with something. And it hasn't gotten to the point where it's like I can do something that's like super self-care-y or something like that. But I don't lie in bed, you know, with my eyes open and just be like, I should be sleeping. I should be sleeping. I should be relaxing. So
yeah,
it's just like, you know what? Okay, I'm not going to fight this.
Yeah.
I'm just going to get up.
I love that. I did something which was hard for me, but I think that the reason it was hard for me is because of my childhood abuse. And I'm really proud of myself that I did it. And it's not even that big of a deal. But it's that I was at work earlier this week and had a very emotion-filled meeting. I was telling you about it earlier. And like we were talking about earlier in the podcast, like if you grew up this way, you're hypervigilant and it's really hard for you not to just, especially if there's any kind of tension or anger or anxiety, like your antenna just go like completely unfold and are like, you know, like what's going on? Do I need to be aware? Right. And so I was drained after this meeting because it was a very emotionally charged meeting at work. And I then had like 2 other things I had to do. Like I had one other meeting I had to go to, and I had like one other thing I had to do. But then I left work after that. I didn't stay until the required time because I, you know, was going to get in trouble if I left early. I was just like, you know what? I am drained. I am absolutely drained from that. And I'm going to take care of myself by leaving early. I left like an hour early. If my bosses are listening to this, no, I didn't leave early. I didn't leave early at all. But yeah, I just was like, you know what? This is something I need. I am feeling drained. I'm not going to be able to function very well if I continue here at work. So I'm just going to go home and cuddle with my dog. So I did. That was something I did.
Because I'm a person, not an object.
I'm sorry, a what?
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
I know those are English words you're putting together, but I just don't understand. I've never heard them in that sequence.
I'm not angry. I'm impressed.
All right. So thank you guys, everyone, for joining us today. This was a really hard episode. So if you've made it this far with us,
unlike all the other ones,
this is such a light podcast. It's just like, something you'd listen to on like a light, breezy summer day.
It's like a beach read.
It is. It's the beach read of. But we want to remind you, if you are someone who's been called a terrible daughter, a horrible daughter, we say, just go with it. You're going to be called horrible names no matter what you do. So we say, just be the villain.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening. We'd be so grateful if you'd follow or subscribe and rate and review our new podcast on your favorite podcast app.
Make sure to share it with friends, family, or anyone that you think may benefit from this content.
And as a final reminder, you are not the crazy one.